Hi, Tom from TNB Tech again. This video is going to build on the previous video where I focused primarily on manual mode, but now I'm going to show how you can use Sony's My Dial feature on a 6400 style camera in aperture or shutter priority mode to essentially turn that camera from a camera with one control dial to a camera with two control dials. Let's go. Okay, here we are again, talking about how to use My Dial on a Sony A6400, very similar on other similarly equipped cameras, and how to basically use this one dial as if it were two dials. Because everybody's complaining, there's no front dial on this camera. You need to have a front dial. You know what? That'd be great. But you don't have one. So maybe you can use this feature called My Dial to approximate having two. And I've shown it before for manual. Most people use Aperture Priority if they're into photography at all, and I use it too. So I just want to show how this can work for Aperture or Shutter Priority as well. So here we go. So your 6400 camera you have set up here, go into the menu, you need to go over to, tab 2. So we just use the D-pad, so you can click right, go up to the top, once that's highlighted, click to the right, get to tab 2, then go over to, click down, then you're going to go to page 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's where the custom keys, custom operation 1 is. And we're going to need to look at custom key for photography, and we're also going to look at My Dial settings. Okay, so first thing you do is you click into My Dial, center button selects, and you can see I had mine set up for shutter speed. So that I go between aperture and shutter speed on this dial. But if you're going to be shooting in either aperture priority or shutter priority, then you're going to want this dial to go from its default to exposure comp. So you don't have to go back and fiddle with this goofy wheel back here. And I don't want to cycle through. I mean, you could set this so it cycles through this setting and then that setting and then that setting. Or, you could cycle through them, but then you'd have to be going 1, 2, 3, 4 different settings every time you hit this button here. Every time you hit that button, you go. So if I wanted to go between two settings, I'd have to go bonk, 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 bonk sometimes, and then bonk, 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 another. So I'd have to hit that button a lot of times, and that would basically slow you down too. So my opinion is, if you decide what you want to do, unfortunately, you can't set up one of your memory recall settings to use different custom button configurations. That would be great. Then I could say, oh, I want the custom buttons to do something different when I'm in different recall modes, but I can't do that. The custom buttons are fixed. Once you've set them up, they're going to stay the same regardless of what mode you go into, regardless of what you do. They'll just do the best they can to execute what you told them to do. So if you're mostly an aperture priority or mostly a shutter priority shooter, then this will work for you. So you just select that first section. You want to choose exposure comp. Like I said, you can set it for ISO if you want, but I think ISO is pretty easy. You just hit this button here and you're in ISO, and you're not trying to rotate. The problem is when you try to rotate this wheel, since it's got 4 buttons on it as well, the pressure to rotate sometimes actuates a button, and you may or may not get into trouble there. So that's the problem with the design. So now I've set the control dial for an alternate function, number 1 of exposure comp. So I go down and then I hit OK by selecting the center button. Now that's set up. I'm going to make sure that my custom key to actuate it is set to this one right here. That is one I want because it's right next to the shutter button. So when I'm holding the camera in its normal way like this, I have my finger on the shutter. I can be moving this dial, and all I'm doing is moving my finger over to here, just doing like that. Boom. Click, click, slap, slap, ding, ding. So I just go tap, move, tap, move, tap. That's all I'm doing. It's very simple. It's almost as easy as having a front dial, really, because front dial, you got to do this, right, and that. Here you're going to do that and that, that. So it's pretty darn good if you can set it up the way it works for you. So I'm going to go over to the custom key for photography, select it. I'm going to try to find that button. It's not on this page, so I hit right. Not on that page, hit right. And there it is right there. I select it, and I want it and it's already set up because it was set up for my manual instructional video, but I wanted to toggle My Dial 1. I don't want to cycle through 1, 2, 3 or toggle My Dial 1, 2 or 1 or 3. I wanted to toggle My Dial 1. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And that's what will happen now that I've selected that. That control dial will now toggle that 1 and it's set to exposure comp, as you can see. So we go down, select it. That's what it does. Now I get out by hitting menu again, back again. And now I'm back looking at my wonderful scene here, thanks to my daughter for drawing this. So to demonstrate it, you either are in aperture or shutter priority mode. So right now I'm in aperture priority mode. By default, this dial is going to be aperture. And as you see, I move it, it's set. So right now it's f4.5 and exposure comp is 0.07. Now normally I'd have to go down here and fiddle with this goofy thing and hope I don't hit any buttons, right? But since we have My Dial set up, I alter my aperture like this, right? If I want to change the exposure comp, I just hit this button right here. I just go tap. Now you can see it's set up for My Dial 1, which is exposure comp. That's what that means. Once you hit that button, and what's frustrating is you can see this on the LCD, but you cannot see it in the EVF. So now that when I turn My Dial, I can adjust the exposure comp, get it just exactly how I want it. Hit the button again, I'm back to aperture. Boom, exposure comp, boom. And you can see when I hit the button to go back to default, it quickly shows you what the dial and wheel are both doing. Right? So it's kind of nice. So aperture, exposure comp, aperture, exposure comp. Now what if I am in shutter priority? Well, let's move over to shutter priority now. Now we are in shutter priority. By default, this is where you're going to be. That dial is shutter speed. And again, exposure comp's down here. So I hit it and I get shutter speed. There it is, shutter speed. I set it nicely. And then what if I want to change exposure comp? Again, I hit this button. And now it shows me My Dial 1, exposure comp. And I just do this. And now I'm changing exposure comp. And unlike Fuji cameras, when I have a very fast shutter speed with a fixed ISO that show me a nice scene, this camera does the right thing and shows me a dark scene. Okay? So I can do this with one dial. I have the function of two dials. It's as easy as that. And that's how you do it for shutter priority and for aperture priority shooting. So there you have it. Basically, you don't need a front dial. So I wish all the other YouTubers would quit harping about needing a front dial, because you don't need one. You saw how easy it was to move your finger, essentially hit the button, turn the dial, hit the button, turn the dial. Almost as easy, practically the same amount of effort to have that front dial. Would I love a front dial? Absolutely. I think they should put one in. I think they're stupid for not doing it. But they did the next best thing by creating the My Dial feature. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please come back, like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.